Welcome, and thank you for being with us tonight for the Palo Alto Unified School District Board of Education Candidates Forum for the November 8th, 2022 election. I'm Liz Niss, President of the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 after women won the right to vote. The League envisions a democracy where every person has the desire, the right, the knowledge, and the confidence to participate. The League is nonpartisan, meaning we need to support nor oppose candidates or parties. Our organization has two distinct roles. One is advocacy for public policy issues about which we have studied and developed formal positions. The other is voter service, which brings voters impartial information on issues and candidates. Voter service is the hat we're wearing today and presenting this forum where you can learn about the candidates running to represent you on the Palo Alto Unified School District Board of Trustees. I'd like to remind everyone that the candidates and our co-sponsors have all agreed to participate under guidelines set for this forum. The forum will be recorded and aired locally, including League's YouTube channel, the link to which will be found on our website, LWVPaloAlto.org. Note that whenever this recording is aired, it must be shown in its entirety to ensure that no candidate statements are used out of context. All candidates have agreed to this requirement. And let me add that the Media Center is recording us tonight. Watch for the replay. It is not done live streaming tonight, so watch for the replay that will be announced. Now it's my pleasure to turn the microphone over to our moderator, Sigrid Pinsky.
Thank you, Liz. Good evening, everyone. I'm proud to be a member of the League of Women Voters and proud to be part of bringing you this opportunity tonight to hear from 3 of the 4 candidates who are running for the Palo Alto Unified School District Board of Education. The candidates participating tonight are, in alphabetical order, Nicole Chu Wang, Shaunak Darup, and Shauna Siegel. Welcome, all of you. Candidate Campos is not present. We did invite Ms. Campos and also offered her the opportunity to send an opening statement to be read in her absence. Now, before we begin, I want to remind the candidates and the audience that this evening we're hosting a forum. It's not a debate, so there's no rebuttal. And I know we won't have any personal attacks, but we don't have them. Candidates have been asked to just focus on their own campaigns. I have also asked the candidates to keep themselves on mute when they're not speaking. Now I'd like to go over the format of our session. We are scheduled to be finished by 8:30, and to help keep us on track, we're using a computerized stopwatch. I ask that the candidates respect our time limits, and I will pleasantly, but I will enforce them. We'll begin with opening statements of up to 2 minutes from each candidate. The order of these statements was randomly determined ahead of time. Then we'll have our question period with questions from the audience. Candidates will be called on in varying order, and we'll have up to 1.5 minutes for their responses. Questions for this forum have been solicited in advance from those who signed up to attend. In addition, tonight, you may send live questions during the forum by email. The email address is forumquestions@googlegroups.com. And I think that's being posted in the chat as we speak. League members are screening the questions we receive to avoid duplication and cover as wide a variety of issues as we can. We also may combine similar questions into a single question. Following the question period, we will have a closing statement from each candidate of up to 1.5 minutes. These statements will be in the reverse order of the opening statements. Okay, that's our format, so we can get started. We're going to go to opening statements, and we're going to begin with you, Mr. Darup.
Thank you. I'm just going to wait until that timer pops up. All right. Evening, everyone. I'm Shaunak Darup. I am a current board member. I'm running for re-election. I grew up in Palo Alto schools. I went to JLS. I went to Gunn. My wife went to Gunn, and we came up through this community. During high school, I wasn't a very good student. I struggled a lot. High school, college, I went to community college after Gunn, and I never really found that spark for learning until I went to law school, became a lawyer, where I represent people whose rights have been infringed. That spark of learning is really what drove me to run the first time around. The desire to make sure that every student, no matter their background, was in an environment that fostered them to find that spark of learning, to engage, to become lifelong learners. The other thing was mental health. Since I'd been at Gunn, mental health had been a huge issue in Palo Alto schools, and it continued to be when I decided to run. And so with those two as sort of the foundations for my platform 4 years ago, I ran and got an incredible amount of gratifying support from the community. In the last 4 years on the board, I've been a part of tackling some of the biggest problems in our district and moving the ball forward on, well, reopening schools, being one of the first districts to reopen safely in the state, moving the ball on reading. Despite COVID, our reading scores have gone up across the board. Struggling students have had massive jumps in reading, despite the fact that we've had the potential for huge learning losses. Equity and mental health were two of my biggest priorities, and both we've made big gains on. And I'm sure I'll talk about that more today. But I'm here today to ask for your support and to give you more information about what I've done the last 4 years and why I think that I should be elected for the next 4 to keep steering the ship in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Ms. Siegel, you're next.
Hi. Experience in education matters. The students, families, and employees of PAUSD should be served by a board with a variety of expertise, especially and including recent and extensive service to public school. I'm a PAUSD alum, a district parent, and a professional educator. I have also served as an in-class substitute teacher and volunteer in PAUSD classrooms. My teaching credential, administrative credential, and 2 master's degrees in education is the kind of relevant experience currently missing from the school board. I would bring to PAUSD my breadth of K-12 experience and all that encompasses. I've been a district parent for 4 years. I'm a K-12 substitute teacher. And for 10 years, I was a high school English and English language development ELD teacher at Lynbrook. My experience includes administrative level work as ELD department chair, where I executed on the mission of the ELD department and oversaw and advised other educators. I also mentored and guided 6 student teachers. As department chair, I was able to help the students and families that needed me the most, and that was the English language learners. I co-developed and launched the English Learners Advisory Committee, ELAC, to help bilingual and English learner parents learn about school culture, procedures, and to facilitate communication between the school staff and bilingual families. At the district level, I co-created and provided oversight to the DLAC, the District English Learner Advisory Committee. While PAUSD has great schools, great students, great teachers, many families continue to leave the district. Teacher morale is very low, and we still have not closed the achievement gap. I grew up in Barron Park, was educated at Ohlone, JLS, and Gunn, and I understand this community and the nuance of issues that are important to people who live and who move here. The historical background allows me to understand the complexities needed to be on the board. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Chu Wong, you're next.
Good evening. First of all, I want to thank you for having us tonight. My name is Nicole Chu Wong, and I'm running for Palo Alto School Board. My parents were both public servants, and I was born with the belief that from those who are given much, much is expected. And when I went to college, knowing I wanted to go into law school, I started as poli-sci and quickly felt it wasn't representative of my experience. And I switched to women's studies and Asian American studies, which provided me with this intersectional lens through which to see the world as a biracial Asian American woman. I participated in outreach and volunteer programs in high schools and intermediate schools throughout Orange County, and particularly saw the effect of the opportunity gap and how it affected certain racial and ethnic groups more than others. And those experiences were foundational to me understanding that if we're ever going to tackle equity issues, systemic racism, systemic discrimination, it has to come from the school level first in order to see real change. I did graduate law school during the recession, and so my path took a different turn in private practice, founding a venture-funded startup and then joining big tech with my scrappy startup mentality and my grit, where I've managed dozens of employees, a multi-million-dollar budget, built teams and team culture with intentionality, all things that will serve me well as I serve in a governing role, which is what the school board does. I also add diversity to the school board because even though Chinese Americans are our largest ethnic group in our school district, there has only ever been 2 Chinese Americans on the school board, and it's been over a decade since we've had one. Additionally, I represent what a lot of families are in this community, which is I moved here. My family chose to move here distinctly for the schools and for the public education. So like so many families, those are the values that I bring. We chose Palo Alto for the value in education, and I'm here to make a positive impact.
Thank you very much. All right, now we're going to go to the audience questions. The first question, and again, I'll remind the audience and candidates you have 1.5 minutes for your answers. The first question has to do with communications. What do you think about PAUSD's current communications? What are your expectations for the PAUSD Public Information Officer? And for this question, Ms. Chuang, you're first.
Thank you. I believe that communication is one of the biggest issues in our school district currently, and it is extremely important. I'm very excited that I believe in maybe less than a week, our new communications officer will be starting, but that's really just the beginning. I think communications officer can be helpful, but we need to have an environment where we encourage participation. And I recently spoke at a board meeting at the end of last year about the importance of allowing Zoom commenting to remain, because we need to find more ways, not less, for our community to give input and contribute, and for us really to have a partnership. So although I believe the school board has taken a lot of really positive steps to address many issues we have, unfortunately, because of lack of communication and a feeling that there isn't a true collaboration, a partnership, people feeling like even if they're given the opportunity to speak, that they're not fully heard, things that I believe are done with good intent and are positive aren't seen that way by everyone because of the process through which we went to get there. And so I have been a bridge builder and in my life, and I'm intentional about building culture as I've built out teams of employees, contractors, vendors, dealt with partners, diverse stakeholders with oftentimes competing values or competing interests. And so I understand what it takes to build these bridges for us to truly get on a better path with communication and get on the same page.
Thank you very much. And Ms. Chuang, could I ask you to blur your background, please?
Sure.
Thank you very much. Mr. Darup, you're next.
Sure, thank you. You know, the COVID period really shone a light on exactly what the communication gap was. There had always been concerns about communication from the community. It was hard to distill down what the general issue was. There was too much communication in some areas, a lot of different disparate areas of emails and messages and information coming from all angles, very difficult to distill and consolidate and really get the kernel of importance out of it. There was too little perceived communication in other areas. And so how to balance that? Well, during COVID, it became clear that that was an issue because we had a lot of information coming at us and a lot of changes we were making sort of minute by minute, and folks wanted to be apprised, but they wanted just the information that was actually going to matter to them, to be meaningful. And so the public information officer, to me, is that opportunity to be able to distill the information down, make sure that there's sufficient information about whatever the topic is, and get that to the parents. That's really the goal. And the board's goal in exercising oversight over that role is the same as exercising oversight over the rest of the district, which is making sure that the community, by extension of the board, community's desires are reflected in the board's policy and direction so that the staff can make sure that the communications they're sending are in line with what the expectations of the community are.
Thank you very much. Ms. Siegel.
Hi, I first wanted to start by saying, in terms of communications, in addition to the fact that it sounds like a great idea that we're having a public informations officer, we've done this in the past and it has had mixed results. But I first wanted to start by thanking the PTA for the great communications that we receive, and also the superintendent for sending weekly emails, as well as our principals. I think the information that we get from the PTA, from our principals, and from the superintendent is great. I'm glad that we're hiring also a public informations officer. And what I know about communications, teacher, department chair, is it's a two-way street. And what we need is not just a public informations officer, but that transparency and how are the decisions being made that are being communicated to the parents. So I do think overall we need to work on the transparency piece. And one of my roles as being a board member would be improving the transparency part, so that we feel like that the communication that is coming down, we understand the process that came in through the communication. I would want to invest more in surveys and more student input, because what I've heard from students and from parents is, yes, there are ad hoc committees, but they've not had their voices been heard before. And so I want to build back that trust and that collaborative community so that there's more engagement from our students and our families.
Thank you. All right, our second question has to do with COVID. What are some positive changes that came out of COVID? And what risks and vulnerabilities were exposed for PAUSD? And for this question, Ms. Ms. Siegel, you're first.
Okay, hi. The question was, what are the positives? And the second part was?
What risks and vulnerabilities were exposed?
Okay. So some of the positives that came out is that we truly saw resilience. We saw resilience in our children more than we hope we need to see again, but we saw resilience in our teachers and everybody stepping up. In the future, I think what we need to do is make sure that if a crisis happens again, that we are prepared. I am in favor of in-person instruction, and so I'd want to have a plan for if a pandemic or another crisis happens, how can we utilize outdoor space? How can we make it so that schools stay open? I would want to improve this planning process and get the community involved to prepare for future crises. I would also want to ensure that we are addressing the mental health issues that came out of COVID. And we have definitely built up, we have wellness programs. We now have 13 in-house therapists that are coming in to our schools. And so it's great that we are hiring in-house, but also we need to make sure that our students understand the privacy issues that could come around having an in-house therapist versus having somebody externally. So I would just want to make sure that we continue to build up our mental health and wellness and to address COVID, and that we're prepared for any future crisis.
Thank you very much. Ms. Chu Wong.
I think the positive of COVID was that we learned the different ways that we can educate. And in not ideal situations, we learned how to address education through Zoom, for example, and that has changed the way that I think we'll go forward for indefinitely. And for some students, being on Zoom is better for them than being in the classroom. And now we know how to do it, and we have that capability. So I think that was a positive, to be able to rethink the way that we've done things, to be able to adapt. I think, however, the pandemic, when you talk about the negatives, it exposed so many systemic issues of inequity. For example, we saw that many students didn't have a quiet place that they could take these Zoom meetings from, or where they could read and study. It showed us that thousands do not have food if they don't have it through our school program. It showed us that many of our students are unhoused. And so it really shed a light on how much more work we need to do, because the process of becoming a successful student and really becoming the happy, healthy humans that we want our students to graduate as there's a lot more input that goes into it than just what happens in the classroom. We have to think of our students in terms of their whole selves. And the pandemic pointed to the ways in which we have inequity systemically and in our community, and things that we need to work on in order to ensure that all students are able to thrive here.
Thank you. Mr. Darup.
Thank you. Sometimes it takes something big to restart. And what I realized during COVID was a lot of the issues that we had already prioritized, for example, equity and mental health, the solutions that we had in place for decades were essentially patchwork solutions. We were always trying to get to the root of the problem, but we were working within the system as it was. After COVID, when that system changed completely, we came back essentially fresh, and we came up with new systems. We have an entirely new plan that we spent all of last year. I was the chair of the Board Equity Oversight Committee. We spent a year developing a plan that addresses 7 different domains of how students are underserved, especially students of color, historically underrepresented students, and socioeconomically disadvantaged students. And we devised a plan with very specific and granular initiatives and goals to support those students and by extension, support all students. The second is mental health, overhauled mental health. Instead of relying on outside providers who were great, but suffered intense staffing shortages during the pandemic, we voted in the spring to allocate over $16 million to develop an in-school mental health system. And as Ms. Siegel said, we've hired a number of therapists to address the staffing shortage, and we've hit the ground running on that. We've also come together closer with the community. We had a One Palo Alto initiative where hundreds of people volunteered to help out in schools in shortages. And we hosted COVID clinics for the community for testing and vaccinations.
Thank you. All right, our next question is dealing with ethnic studies. There's a lot of interest in the question of ethnic studies. We got several questions on this topic. Given the new state requirement, how should PAUSD implement an ethnic studies program? What's your opinion of the ethnic studies model program? And Mr. Darup, you're next.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The ethnic studies model program, the first iteration of it, had a number of very serious issues of concern for members of our community. There was a vein of anti-Semitism that ran through the first iteration, and people were rightly very concerned about that. The second model seems better, but it sort of is an indication that when we adopt our new ethnic studies curriculum, what as a board member I would do is first rely on staff, the experts, to look at the model, decide whether that model is appropriate for our community and our community's values and our pedagogical goals, come to us with a proposal. And that proposal will have input from other experts, from stakeholders. We will get community feedback on what that proposed curriculum is and what the reactions are to it. And based on all that information, then I'd be comfortable making the decision. But as a board member, especially in an area where we are not the experts, it's very important to rely on all of these different pieces, the experts in the staff, the stakeholders in the community, and the models that have been developed for us in order to determine what we should do going forward, rather than adopting whole cloth something that was developed for the state as a whole.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel, you're next.
Hi. As someone with K through 12 classroom experience, I would say I know that not everything that comes from the state in its first iteration is right for all students, or especially for PAUSD students. So I am in favor of adding ethnic studies curriculum into our high schools, and would want to take a close look at the curriculum and having the teachers be part of this, I would call it professional learning communities, PLCs, to look at the curriculum, and especially look at teachers who are already teaching ethnic studies as an elective, and look also at Mountain View. They're piloting an ethnic studies class right now. I would like to look at how other districts are doing it. How is it going? The teacher in me wants to look at best practices and get feedback from the community, because what I have heard and what I've been hearing from parents in this community and in other communities is they just want transparency, understand the curriculum. Lots of times people are upset about this or this, and I said, well, let me try to explain it from a teacher perspective or an administrator perspective. And if we can bring everyone to the table and improve the communication process, I think we can create and be part of this really positive curriculum. It could be very positive.
Thank you. Ms. Chuan.
Well, I am thrilled that ethnic studies is going to become a mandatory course in high school. I do not think that that is enough, and I do not think it's happening soon enough. We already are fortunate to have an ethnic studies elective. I would propose that we use the curriculum from that to launch ethnic studies as a requirement even earlier, because once it changes to a requirement, more students will have access to it inherently because it's required. Whereas now as an elective, students that want to take it are not always able to. And from what I understand, that curriculum versus the state curriculum, our ethnic studies program focuses more on local instead of world context. And we do live in a global community here in Palo Alto, so it's important for us to expand that. So I would, obviously I have a lot of opinions on this, being someone who's formally educated in college at this level. I would look to what universities are doing in addition to other school districts and form a committee with all members of our community, because we are so fortunate in Palo Alto to have so many civically minded and people that have engaged in activism over decades. I would seek to include our entire community as we work through this. And I think the ultimate goal, in addition to ethnic studies being a requirement, should be to actually have a more inclusive, a truly diverse and representative US history and world history in addition to ethnic studies. That's where I hope we get eventually, but we have to start somewhere and we need to start soon. And I would like to expand even younger than high school. I think we should be teaching ethnic studies in age appropriate ways much earlier.
Thank you very much. Right. Our next question has to do with curriculum. What role, if any, should parents have in curriculum adoption? And Mr. Darp, you're first for this one.
Sure. Our curriculum adoption process is laid out in board policy and regulations, and it does provide for stakeholder and parent input, because like I said in the last question, it's important for the community's values to be reflected in the way we adopt curriculum. And so it's critical for parents to be involved in the process through the working groups and ad hoc committees as the curriculum is being developed and matriculating up to the board. So that's the process as it is, and it's an appropriate process and one that does seek feedback. I know there's also feedback that's targeted towards specific school sites, and additionally, board members often reach out once the curriculum is elevated to the board level to seek additional input from parents and community members to assist them in their voting decision, to give additional context to what the community is perceiving with respect to the curriculum that's been proposed.
Thank you. Ms. Chuan.
When we consider curriculum, I think it's very important that we have input from the community and from all the different stakeholders in our school district. So that is the teachers, the staff, the administrators, the school board, our students themselves, and parents. And I having watched the board meetings where we did our most recent curriculum adoption, which was the ELA curriculum adoption in May, I would say that it became clear that there are issues with the process that we use right now. And I know from speaking with parents, I've now gone and knocked on hundreds of doors across our city to talk to parents and students and community members. And it was very clear to me from the board meetings about the ELA adoption and from my conversations that people were not happy with the process. And so whether they would have gotten behind that curriculum, I don't know, because the process was flawed. And so although I feel like the intent of the process is good, it didn't feel good watching the process play out. And so I think we need to re-examine to make sure that people feel that not only if they're asked to give input, that input matters. Because the last thing I think we want to show anyone in our community, and certainly not our students, is that things are rubber stamped and that the voice that we give that we want to hear from is not listened to.
Thank you very much. Ms. Siegel.
Hi. In terms of curriculum adoption, I was at the board meeting where the language arts curriculum discussion and adoption happened. And when I see something that doesn't seem right, I stand up. I stood up at that board meeting and I spoke because there were 25 teachers in the pilot program. This is an example of how I would look at curriculum. And of the 25, only 21 were in favor of this curriculum. And the overwhelming theme that they said is this curriculum benchmark is not going to help our struggling students and might even exacerbate the achievement gap. That's all I needed to hear, was that 21 out of our 25 teachers were saying this could make the achievement gap worse, and here is why. I was also surprised that no one in terms of parents were not aware that this curriculum was being piloted. When I shared with parents that I went to a board meeting, they said, this curriculum's being piloted? I said, yes, it's being curriculum K through 5. Parents were not aware. And so we do need to improve the communication, because I do feel that if parents were aware and they heard that the vast majority of piloted teachers, and again, being on curriculum committees myself, it is an honor to be chosen as to be one of the piloted teachers. It means you've been there for a long time, and to have my feedback not be heard, respected, or validated would be concerning. And I worry about teacher morale. And so, yes, I would improve the communication of it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, our next question has to do with equity. What do you think the board should do moving forward to continue to address equity issues? We got several questions on this, and one mentioned the SWIFT program. So for this question, Ms. Shuang, you're first.
Thank you. I think equity is, as I mentioned in my opening, a big reason why I first became passionate about focusing on schools when it comes to equity in our greater society. I think the SWIFT program, which is dense and thorough and so much time and effort from so many different stakeholders went into creating, I think it is great. And we obviously need time to implement programs addressed towards the issues that were highlighted by the SWIFT initiative. And I also think it's important as we roll it out that we continuously evaluate and refine and innovate the way that we're doing things, so that this does not become a stale set of goals that we saw in 2022, but rather it changes with us. And in that respect, I think we can use a great example of the Every Student Reads initiative recently, which I stood up at the last board meeting and applauded the results that we've seen so far, where we are having huge leaps and bounds in reading level for our 8-year-old readers that are Black, Brown, and Pacific Islander. And what I think I want to speak about on that is the fact that they added another key performance indicator that they didn't have when they started, because they felt that they needed that to truly evaluate whether it was successful. So that's the kind of thing I want to do moving forward, is continue to look at how we're evaluating and what we're doing, and continue to grow and improve incrementally moving forward.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel.
I would like to thank the current board for creating the SWIFT plan. It is something that the district can and should be very proud of. And the implementation of it is going to be very important. And in addition to implementation, is assessing the effectiveness of it. I was also really excited to see the reading scores go up. There are 2 subcategories where it didn't meet the 3%, and those are English language learners, and I'm always looking at English language learner data, as well as our special ed students. And so I think it's important we continue to make sure all the groups are looked at, and we want to achieve the 3% goal. We have tutoring as well. We have interventions, we have after school programs. And I think as long as we continue to think bigger picture, that our problems are structural and systemic. And so I'd want to keep the SWIFT plan, but also be thinking outside the box. If we need consultation with experts in that field, or more student task forces to keep the communication open, I would want to provide more resources for family support and education and community partnerships when I helped to create the ELAC and the DLAC, what I found is that the more community engagement you get, the more translation services you can provide, the more you can get closer to closing the achievement gap and creating an equitable school and school district environment.
Thank you. Mr. Darup, sorry.
The the SWIFT plan is actually the thing that I'm the most proud of over the last 4 years. When I was the president in 2021, I led the charge to create the Board Equity Oversight Committee, which then, as the chair, we spent a year developing the SWIFT plan. And so I could talk for an hour and 12 minutes instead of a minute and 12 seconds on the SWIFT plan, but I'll give you the broad overview, which is it is a comprehensive plan to do what we have not done before, which is to collect and consolidate every single initiative, current and planned, and provide a single guiding plan through which the community and the board can provide oversight. So there are 7 different domains that the committee isolated that all affect students' learnings, and not just learning, but generally their engagement and their ability to be fostered in school, from student supports to curriculum to district operations to professional development for teachers and staff, all coming together. Each of those 7 domains has 3 to 4 building blocks. Each of those building blocks have goals. Each of those goals have initiatives with timelines, with specific individuals in the district who are tasked with meeting those goals and moving those initiatives towards those timelines. So it's very granular. It provides a blueprint for everybody in the district and for the board to provide to have oversight to make sure that we are moving closer to our priority goal, which is closing the achievement gap and making sure that all of our students are supported to succeed, whatever success means.
Thank you. All right, our next question regards mental health. What model of mental health services delivery do you favor for PAUSD? How would you compare or describe our mental health focus / offering at the elementary and at the secondary levels? And for this question, Ms. Chu Wang, you're first.
Thank you. Mental health has and continues to be a major issue, mental health and well-being in our school district. And I believe that integrating mental health services and mental health professionals is the right thing to do. And I'm very pleased that we did this in our district for various reasons. One of the main ones being that hiring is very difficult right now, and making them employees of our district makes us more competitive and able to get the staff that we need. Although, to be clear, we do need more staff. Again, all the students that I've talked to, I have heard repeatedly that there are not enough staff in the wellness centers, and that staff also needs to be diverse and representative of our student body, because that is oftentimes where a student can feel the most trust in an adult in their lives, is somebody that maybe understands them culturally. So I think we have more work to do, but I'm glad we integrated. I am glad that we have continued this with the hiring of mental health professionals for our elementary schools. And I think we just need to do even more here. And in addition, I think the bigger issue for me, because we've already taken these big steps and will continue to do so with integrating mental health care professionals, but it's having conversations as a community about the culture in our school district that I believe is actually the biggest driver to mental health issues for our students, the culture of pressure and where that's coming from. And it's not a blame game, and there are multiple facets, but we need to start having this tough conversation.
Thank you. Mr. Darup.
Thank you. Yeah, building a school-based mental health framework is huge. Like I said, we had staffing shortages during COVID, but those weren't the only issues we've had. Even without the staffing shortages, outside of what the district offered, for years, students have had a really tough time getting an appointment with a therapist. It's just difficult, if not impossible. The wellness centers, we built them, but of course, physical infrastructure is one piece of the puzzle. And so bringing that all together in a comprehensive plan is the first step. We've now hired we've hired 10 on-site therapists for the elementary schools, 1 full-time on-site for each middle school, 1 full-time on-site therapist for each high school, and 2 or 3 additional for the high schools, in addition to a number of wellness staff and counselors and administrators to staff the wellness centers and make sure students have a place to go to be supported in their mental health. You know, the self time that there is a gun and similar at Pally, that could be a great resource for students' mental health and wellness as well. And so I'm currently on the ad hoc committee for the work to devise a plan on what to do with self, how to make sure that that time is being better utilized so students can actually use it to get some net benefit to their mental health and wellness. So these are sort of parts of the puzzle. So is curriculum, SEL, social emotional learning, but they all come together in a school-based framework.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel.
Hi, as an educator, including 10 years at the high school level, I know that if students are not ready to learn, they will not be able to learn. And having gone to GUM myself, I can say I'm very happy that now there are wellness centers at GUM that weren't there before. I'm in huge support of these wellness centers. And when I decided how to volunteer my time, in addition to subbing, I saw that in the elementary level, that the SEL, the health and wellness, the mental health was not as strong. So I decided to become a Project Cornerstone reader at the elementary school level. Project Cornerstone is a program through the YMCA that helps build SEL skills in elementary school students. And I think it's a great program. I'm part of it, but we need more. And so yes, we've hired in-house therapists and that's great. But again, we need to assess their effectiveness. And we always want to be checking in with the students and having clear, this is the goal and what's the outcome, and making sure that the outcome is achieving our goal. And one thing I've heard from, I've been talking to a lot of high school students, and they say that self, the idea is great, but the implementation might be the problem. It's very teacher dependent. And they would love to see it be more streamlined, maybe by specialists. I don't know how we do that, but I want to look at best practices from what Pally's doing, what's GUN's doing, to more closely align, because what's good for students is good for students.
Thank you. All right, our next question. This is another curriculum question. What role does the board play when library or curriculum books are challenged? And Mr. Darup, you're first.
Sure. Well, when curriculum or books are challenged, then the board's role is to listen and hear the concerns, ask staff if required to review the concerns and figure out where they're coming from, what the issue is. And then, you know, it's the hope that amount will catalyze staff to address concerns if there are concerns in the community. But on top of that, you know, the board is very involved in the oversight process for the approval of materials, instructional materials, and so through that process, any concerns about instructional materials matriculate up to the board level, and the board has final say over whether or not that will be approved moving forward. So it has happened, I think, on my tenure on the board, where I've heard concerns about certain bits in books or other materials. And so as a part of the SWIFT plan, what the board is committed the district to doing is making sure that we are espousing culturally responsive pedagogy. And that includes making sure that there is appropriate representation in the materials for instruction.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel.
Hi, it's interesting you bring that up. I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago, and it was something like 1,600 books in the last year have been banned by school districts in the United States. And being a former English teacher, this stood out to me. It might have been 1,500, it was something in that range. But I also remember when I was teaching high school English, parents would have concerns with different books we were teaching. And so what I would do, it's increasing communication. It's listening, it's understanding. It's coming from a place of trying to bridge awareness. And so I would come to it from that point as well as a board member. I'd want to hear from the parents. I'd want to understand. I'd want to talk to staff. I'd want to look at where the concern is coming from. How can we educate? Because what I found as an educator and as a department chair is for us, through educating parents and explaining why we are teaching what we're teaching, and sometimes bringing in translators if needed, bringing in district staff, looking at it from a district level as well as a school level. But it's just, for me, it would be important to improve communication in this and in all areas.
Thank you. Ms. Chuang.
Much like what Ms. Siegel commented about reading an article, I recently was listening to a podcast about this very subject and how there are now Facebook groups that are devoted to helping other groups use the same list of books and read through books for trigger words and subject matter to have them banned. And I agree that this is a communications issue. And to me, I analogize it to discussions that we've already had in this district regarding, for example, sex education, or even when you think about it, changing the bell schedule for students to get more sleep. We engage different people for different needs. And so like with sleep, we engaged pediatricians to come in and educate about why more sleep was important. And we did similar thing with doctors and sex education. And so I think in this case, it would be important for us as a community to think about to understand the concern with that subject matter and with these books, and then to move forward in a way where we can talk about it. Because if we can't, you have to be able to name these things and have healthy conversations about this. This is the behavior we want to model for our children. So as a school board member, I understand everything that Mr. Darup has said, and I would support that process, but I would also seek to include more people from the community so that we're truly working together to come together as a community to understand why having these materials is important.
Thank you. Okay, our next question. This has to do with teacher retention. Is teacher retention a struggle for PAUSD? What does PAUSD currently do about retention, and what more, if anything, should be done? And for this question, Ms. Siegel, you're first.
Hi, yes, teacher retention is a big concern. If you look at the most recent PAEA survey, 60% of PAUSD teachers have been thinking about leaving PAUSD, not teaching, but PAUSD. And it's not because of COVID. They could fill out why they are thinking. It's from lack of support from the district office. That was the one category that they said was having the biggest impact. This is a big concern. What is keeping them here? They love their jobs. Teachers love their jobs. And the children, the parents, but we need to be doing a better job at the district level. And if we have pilot committees, we view them as the experts, and we need to be making sure that communication is being done in a thoughtful manner. In terms of professional development, also making sure that professional development is done in a more collaborative way. I think it was about 2 weeks ago, my kids' elementary school teacher had to do their iReady training in a classroom that was 93 degrees. And they had asked if they could please go to a coffee shop that had air conditioning. It was from 2 to 4 p.m. It was after school hours. And they were told no, they needed to do the iReady training in their classrooms. Unless we start treating our teachers with respect and treating them as professionals, we will lose this amazing teaching staff that we have.
Thank you. Ms. Chuang.
Retention is always an issue when it comes to teachers, and yet we do not have a turnover problem in our district. We are fortunate that our teachers stay for a long time. That doesn't mean that they're satisfied. And I say retention is always an issue we should be thinking about, because again, retention is one of the ways we can measure teacher happiness and satisfaction. And I know I would like to ensure that our teachers feel heard and respected and valued. And I think there are many ways that we can do that. I've been talking to teachers. I am honored to have received the endorsement of our teachers union, PAEA, which I think speaks volumes because I'm not one of them, but I have spoken to them and had meaningful conversations and shown them through actions that I do want to hear them and work with them and get their input. So there are a lot of things that lead to teacher dissatisfaction that I think we should address. And first and foremost, when we talk about mental health and wellness, we tend to talk about it with our students, but I think we should also think about it with our teachers and staff, because we need to think about our entire school community, and we need to work with our teachers and staff to have them help to identify what they want. So while pay is always an issue, certainly we need to talk to them about would they prefer higher pay or smaller classrooms, because oftentimes that money is coming from the same bucket of the budget and we can't just give both out. So there are a lot of things that we need to do to communicate to improve the condition for teachers. And I agree that situation with the training and the air conditioning was unacceptable, and it's one example of the way we need to be better partners to our teachers and staff.
Thank you. Mr. Darup.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's really important for us to support our teachers however we can, whether it's through professional development, fostering communication, two-way communication. Very, very important because they're the backbone of our kids' education. Retention, as I've looked at it in similar districts and districts across the state, has really come down to two things, and one more than the other. One is salary. I mean, that is always tends to be the driving factor in districts that have retention issues, from what I've seen. And we have competitive salaries in our district. I think that the only unified school district in the Bay Area that has higher max teacher salaries than us is Santa Clara Unified. We're number 2 in that area, including high school union school districts. We're number 3 because Mountain View High School has beats us in that area, but we're in the top. But the other thing is teacher housing and staff housing, because teachers and staff, many of them have to commute a great deal to come into our district. And it's really the majority of teachers. Actually, a lot of staff live in Palo Alto or close by, but the majority of teachers do not. And so teacher housing is something that's really important. And in the near future, it's going to become something that we're going to have to look into if the current housing crisis continues and it becomes an issue of retention in surrounding districts as well.
Thank you. The next question refers to the promise. How is our district using the priority areas in the promise as a guide? What areas do you agree or disagree with? And a part 2 to this question is, do the current 8 ad hoc committees reflect the highest priorities? For this question, Ms. Chuang, you're first.
The way I view the PAUSD promise, which I am really glad that we have, and I do think credit is where credit is due, is with our superintendent, Dawn Austin, for pushing us to have this. It is our roadmap and it's connected to everything that we do. And I think that it's our guiding principles that direct us in the things that we need to focus on. And so I feel that it is incredibly valuable. And just as I mentioned with the SWIFT plan, we should these are currently our values, and like any mission statement or any roadmap, it's something that should continue to be evaluated and refined as situations change and we adapt and grow. But I do think it was a great first step, and I am excited to see the way that it's shaping decisions already and will continue into the future. I know before there was the PAUSD promise, it felt like there were so many different goals and initiatives, and it could be hard to track. And one of the most important things in ensuring that we meet our goals is to have a central vision and roadmap, and the PAUSD promise does that. So I'm very grateful that we have it. I'm excited to see it continue to extend its reach into ensuring that we stay focused and move the needle in meaningful ways in our district.
Thank you. Mr. Darup.
In one of my very first meetings on the board in 2018, I asked sort of naively as a new board member, is there anything that we have in the district, like some sort of packet that we get every year that tells us how we've done on all the various metrics we use to measure success for our students in our district? whatever those are. And everyone sort of laughed and said, well, that would be a really big undertaking. And we undertook it. 4 years later, we not only have a master plan, but we have, and by the way, a master plan that has been the product of an incredible amount of work, not just from staff, but from community members who participated in those discussions and lent their input, and the PTA Council and everyone, stakeholders who came together and said, these are the goals. And the board said, yes, these are the goals. And then at the end of last year, for the first time, we got that thing I asked for at the very first or second meeting, which was we got a packet that listed our priority areas from the promise, went through exactly where we moved on those goals over the last year. And it was everything we need to be able to effectively exercise oversight as a board over the district, because it tells us where our gaps are, where we did well, where we didn't do well, and gives us context into the areas we should be prioritizing for the coming year.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel.
Hi, yes, I'm very glad that PAUSD has a promise, and promises are great. And again, the implementation of it is very important. One part of my priorities that's been one of my priorities since I started my campaign in July is differentiated instruction. And I think if we can support teachers to utilize differentiated instruction, it will help us to fulfill the PAUSD promise, which promises to support all students and to appropriately challenge, support, and engage all students. What I've seen as a teacher is if we can support and challenge students, we get happy students, our mental health improves, and they become lifelong learners, which is a goal of teaching. In terms of the ad hoc committees, I think they're great. I would have liked to see a special ed ad hoc committee. I've been meeting with a lot of special ed groups throughout the last 3 months, and they feel like their voices really are not being heard. And I'm also hearing from that group that it's becoming way more litigious and not as collaborative, and the I in the IEP, the individual part, is not happening. And so I would want to look at that as well. I also know that there were many people who wanted to get on the ad hoc committees, experts in the fields, who were not chosen. And so I think it also makes this a difficult process when there's limits to how many people can be in the ad hoc committee. So hopefully everybody can still contribute even if they can't get on a committee.
Thank you. All right. The next question. PAUSD is known as a college prep district. What does that mean? What should stay the same? What modifications or extensions would you like to see? And for this question, Ms. Chuang.
Thank you. I have spoken to parents at Gunn and at Pally about the futures that we show our students. And I've talked to students about this too. And I believe that, and that's one of my priorities, is inspiring our students to own their futures, whatever they may be passionate about, encouraging them to explore, having ways that they can do that. We have Beam at Gunn, and we have career pathways and similar programs at Pally and Gunn. I believe we should be expanding these programs so that students can really find what they're passionate about and then pursue that. We have a big emphasis on AP classes, and I understand why, because they're viewed as desirable or necessary to get into colleges that students want to go to. But I want to acknowledge the fact that 20%, I believe it's 20 or 25% of our students go to Foothill De Anza out of graduating. And we do have wonderful programs like an early childhood education program at Pally that are focused on career training and vocational training and career development. I think we need more of those, because not all of our students may choose to go to a university after graduation. And just overall, there is a strong emphasis on STEAM, and I understand that, on STEM and math and science. And I believe we do need to have some balancing with humanities and encouraging students to, or basically allowing students to find and pursue their passions, whatever that may be, whether that's art, science, math, whatever that may be.
Thank you. Mr. Dara.
Being a college prep district is a loaded characterization. because what it means is that historically in Palo Alto, we have focused as a community on building excellent college students, but not so much on engaged and excited and passionate lifelong learners. And that's a huge issue. It's been a huge issue traditionally for mental health in this district. It is manifested in national admissions scandals, like the one that happened with Stanford from parents in our backyard. I mean, that is a product of an unhealthy, long time fixation on just getting into the best colleges, whatever best is. And so over the last 10 years, we've taken steps to look more holistically at what it means to be successful, what it means to support our students to succeed. And over the last 4 years, as I campaigned on 4 years ago, we've expanded and broadened the diverse pathways for students to succeed through vocational opportunities, through industry certifications, through internships, through dual enrollment, so that students can actually be in an environment that fosters their desire to learn, which, by the way, any teacher you talk to, that's exactly what they want for their students. And so when there is a disconnect between what's happening in the classroom and what the priorities are from the community, then you have a lot of friction. And so we need to get away from that friction and focus students on more holistic approaches to being well-rounded, healthy, happy students with a passion for learning.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel.
I want to say that my experience at Gunn, I was very grateful for all the electives that we had and that we still have. And I'm very proud to be part of a district that at the high school levels offers many pathways that are not just to get into top colleges, but as we mentioned before, vocational pathways, as well as amazing theater, arts, etc. And we need to make sure that we keep our enrollment up so that we can keep these electives. I would like to state that we need more college advisors, whether a child is getting advised to go or a student is getting advised to go to Foothill, to go to De Anza, to take a gap year. What I know is that not being able to talk to a college counselor is increasing stress for our students. I've talked to many students in the past months, in the past years, and they say, I didn't hear from my college counselor. I didn't meet with them. And I'm like, okay, I guess we need to work on the advocacy skills. But on the flip side, if we want to create equity, we need to make sure that everyone is being able to meet with a college counselor, not just the people that can pay for their own private college counselor. I also would want to improve communication starting in 8th grade about if you pick these classes, it will open these other classes or might close other doors. Because for me, I remember going into 9th grade, not knowing how to pick classes. And so I'd want to improve communication for everyone, just so every pathway that they want is an option. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our next question. Does PAUSD have an issue with declining enrollment? Does the district need to start preparing for the impact of the new housing that's being built? And for this question, Mr. Darup, you're first.
Sure. We have declining enrollment. Whether it's a problem, in a basic aid district like ours, in terms of funding, which majority comes from property taxes, declining enrollment doesn't directly translate to less money. In fact, it translates to more money per student. It's a problem in other ways because it necessarily reduces the diversity of our schools, since the declining enrollment for us is most likely attributable to the rising housing prices and the lack of affordable housing, which of course is going to severely limit who can come to Palo Alto and send their kids to Palo Alto schools. That's a problem. And so that's one piece of it. And the solution, of course, is really a regional solution that our city and our county have to take up, and they have in our state for housing. It's something the district can do as well in a limited fashion because we don't have the same tools and resources and zoning abilities that our city does, but it's a problem that we face nevertheless. An example is Coverly, where we need to retain some space for a school, because that's a big debate that's happening with Coverly. And even though there's declining enrollment now, We don't know. It's hard to read the tea leaves for enrollment. It might pick up again. In the past, we've shut down campuses, and because land prices have gone up, we've been unable to recoup. So we need to be flexible with respect to enrollment, but it doesn't present us with an immediate financial problem like it would in another district that relies on enrollment for dollars.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel.
Hi, yes, I'll start just because it ties in with the Coverly part. Shanik and I have been on the same page that we do need to preserve school land for schools. We don't know the foreseeable future, and I've been here for 40 years and seen the waves and ebbs and flows of enrollment, and it's important that we keep that. Yes, we are losing enrollment at Walter Hayes. I believe the number since 2012 is around 52% fewer students at Walter Hayes. And declining enrollment is for a variety of reasons. I agree that housing is one of the reasons. I started a school consulting business about 3 or 4 years ago to help families who relocated find the right educational fit. And in recent years, my school people were coming to me instead from Palo Alto, saying Palo Alto is not meeting the needs of my child, whether that child had learning differences, whether that child was not feeling safe, whether that child was not finding the right fit academically. I am concerned that we're not meeting the needs of our students, and we're losing a lot of families to private school or going to other public school districts. And this affects us. We're now getting combo classes at schools that don't usually have combo classes. We have a lot fewer pie donations. That results in fewer aides in the classroom. Pie donations, which so grateful for our PI team, but it also supports our music program at the elementary school level and science and arts. So we need to do what we can to increase our enrollment.
Thank you. Let's see. Hang on. Sorry.
I don't think I've answered this one yet, Sigrid.
Okay, thank you. I'm just
Thank
looking
you.
at my, thank you.
No,
My
I'll go
chair
ahead.
just fell apart. Go ahead. Thank you.
Actually, I'll wait for the timer. Thank you. So the number one driver, I have seen the studies, the number one driver of declining enrollment, and also the way that I think we can protect our neighborhood schools, is addressing the housing crisis. So, and then in regards to, because building housing is going to help make it more affordable, especially if we're building affordable housing, which is what I should have said. Building affordable housing, to be clear. It's what's going to bring students into our district that otherwise wouldn't afford to be able to be here. And it addresses, in having it all over the city will help protect our neighborhood schools by ensuring that the rise in enrollment that results from affordable housing will affect them all. But I do believe as a basic aid school district, we will not see nearly the impact, and we will be able to weather this storm. In regards to whether we'll need additional schools built in the future, there is a trend nationwide and worldwide of declining birth rates. And that, combined with the declining enrollment we're experiencing right now, is why I do not believe that we need to be land hoarders and keep the school from the potential possibility, which I don't think is in the cards for at least the next 100 years. But I do want to acknowledge that, yes, we would most likely do a land swap, and in that way we would still have land if we were to need something for some sort of a school in the future. Also, the pandemic has changed the way that we educate, and so we may realize that some students don't need to be on campus to learn their best. And so these things are all going to change the shape of the district moving forward.
Thank you. All right, our next question. This has to do with community schools. What do you think of the community school concept? Should we be exploring this idea? Why or why not? And Ms. Chu-Wang, you happen to be next.
Thank you. With regards to community schools and just different learning initiatives in general, I believe that we should be open to innovating the way that we educate. And I think we've done a good job of doing that already. And we need to, rather than exploring, yes, we should explore new ways to innovate, but I also think that we have incredibly successful initiatives that we've already implemented in our district that we need to expand before we take any sort of holistic shift and consider other methods. So for example, Ohlone is highly impacted. People want to be at Ohlone. And although we've done more project-based learning as a result of what we learned at Ohlone, I believe Ohlone should be expanded. I feel the same way about our bilingual, our dual language immersion programs that are impacted, and our choice programs in general. JLS Connections is another good example, as well as career pathways and similar programs between Pally and Gunn. So I would focus more on the programs we've already incubated and seen not only to be successful and lead to better student outcomes, but also to be highly in demand. And I would focus on improving in terms of resources we offer to those programs and expanding them throughout our district. So it's not a select handful of students that get to experience those benefits every year.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel.
Hi, as district enrollment continues to shrink, the administrator in me wants to be mindful of expanding programs that we might not be able to support long-term. And I'd want to look at attrition in upper grades and just be cautious about offering programs that we might not be able to support long-term. I am a huge fan of small learning communities, such as Small Learning Community Team, Engineering Pathways, Social Justice, to create better and smaller connections within our large high schools. We can find that, in maybe theater or music as well. But if we can find these small learning communities within a school, it helps us feel more connected. In terms of JLS, I would love to be able to offer the project learning program to more students, as I know a large majority do not get in, as we already have the facility to house that. It would be great if more people could get into Connections, because project-based learning helps all students learn, and again, helps to differentiate instruction. And so if these types of programs have waiting lists and we have data that we can provide enrollment equity, funding parity, and handle space issues, then I am in favor.
Thank you. Mr. Darup.
The concept of community schools is such a good one. It's, how do we make it so that our neighborhood schools aren't just the schools in our neighborhood, but they are the schools of our neighborhood? And we've, in the past, taken steps towards that, more so in the last couple of years, with the priority goal of service to others. In that direction, building out from our district and our schools to find areas that we can serve the community and reach out. And then the other way, where we are helped by our community partners, whether it's internships or apprenticeships for our students, programs like Dream Catchers that help with supporting our most underserved students. We have a slew of community partners, and even with our school-based mental health system, we still have community mental health resources and partners, and that continues to build that mesh, which is really what the concept of a community school is like. And the more we can get closer and closer to the ideal of a community school, the better it is, because necessarily the communication that's fostered between the stakeholders in the community and the schools themselves, and the feeling of community itself, is one that is only beneficial for students as they go through from elementary school to middle school to high school and are supported every step of the way, not just academically, but their selves, their truest selves are supported by the people around them.
Thank you. All right. Our next question has to do with reading. How is our reading initiative progressing? Sorry. What data should we look at? How frequently and for whom? And for this question, Ms. Siegel, you're first.
Okay. I was also, at the board meeting, I was very happy to hear and then to look on paper that our reading scores improved at a time when across the United States, reading scores declined. Having an initiative where we have clear expectations and outcomes and looking closely at interventions as early as possible is important. I am a fan of a dyslexia screener for all students, grades K through 2, because again, what I've learned as an educator, as an administrator, is the earlier we can catch reading struggles, the better chances we have of catching them up. So I've been very pleased with what we've seen in terms of Every Child Raised. As I mentioned before, we could do more work with our English language learners. We could do more work with our special education population. And what I found being in the classroom is the power of read alouds too, and encouraging parents to read aloud to your children. Again, just improving the communication there. And I do feel like we have amazing teachers who will take the curriculum they're given and make sure that they're identifying students early. I also would like to see after school programs offered for every grade at every site. And if we need to hire additional after school teachers, we do for students who are struggling. And then we have the Tinsley buses come later to pick up those kids if there are Tinsley kids, to address equity.
Thank you. Mr. Darup.
Thank you. So we had the Every Student Reads initiative that we began last May, 2021. And the measurements mostly are centered around the standardized testing from the state, because currently that's one of the most standardized ways to measure progress. And what we saw was the district had set, for example, a 3% goal for a number of different student groups that have traditionally, we've seen, are underserved and are struggling with respect to reading. So we had Hispanic or Latino, we had socioeconomically disadvantaged students, SED, Hispanic or Latino students, English learners, and students with disabilities, as well as Black or African American students. With a 3% growth goal, we saw students far exceed that goal in every group. For the students that we were tracking, for example, the Black or African American group jumped from by about 30%, as did the SED, Hispanic or Latino students, almost 30%. I mean, that is, and everybody surpassed their goals, but 30% is sort of it's a mind-blowing increase. And so I would say, keep doing what we're doing, because right now it's making the biggest gains we've seen in as long as I can remember. So this is the trajectory. This is the direction we need to keep going in.
Thank you. Ms. Chuang.
Thank you. And I do want to address your question, but first I want to clarify something from my previous answer, because I went first and I misheard your question about community schools. So I just want to clarify that I am 100% for community schools. And I believe that many of the initiatives that we've taken, such as integrating mental health care, as well as providing food for all of our students at our schools, is along the vein of the concept of community schools. And so I would want to continue to expand the programs we have and also move towards community schools, absolutely, to continue to serve our unique community in which each school sits. In regards to reading, I believe I mentioned as an example in my prior answers, I am very excited and hopeful because of the results that we just got, but there's a lot more work to do. And I think these results point to the fact that the curriculum itself doesn't actually matter if we're providing the right resources to help our teachers and our aides to be able to serve these students. And so we just need to continue to do similar to what we've done, but with those populations those target communities that we were looking at that did not hit their goals, we need to go back to the drawing board with them, because it can't be a one-size-fits-all approach. And we've got some great learnings here. And so I'm excited to see what we're able to do next, now that we know how we've been effective and how we've been ineffective.
Thank you. Well, unbelievably, we have our last question coming up. I'm always so surprised. For our last question, I'm going to ask you what you wish I'd asked you during this forum. So first up is Mr. Darup.
Oh, I see. The question is what you should have asked.
Yeah, what do you wish I'd asked you? Yes.
Well, I think the question that's a good one for a board candidate forum is, what do you think the role of a board member is, and what are the best characteristics of a board member? And I can answer that question.
You may.
The goal of the board is oversight, it's policy, it's direction, it's interfacing with the community and listening to as many possible perspectives as you can, so your decisions are founded in not just your own view, but the views of as many folks in the community as you can get. That's really important, and that ties in well with the best traits. The best trait, I think, for a board member is thoughtfulness, which to me is a blend of sort of analytical thinking and empathy. It's a blend because you really have to have both to take into consideration the high level issues of budget and compliance and whatnot that we deal with, and also the real human impacts of those decisions to our students.
Thank you. And next is Ms. Chuan.
Thank you. Oh, I can't see the timer. Sorry. There it is.
Okay.
Thank you. I will take a little bit of credit because I think I'm the one who asked Shaunak that exact question when we first met. But the question I would want to be asked is, why am I qualified to serve on the school board? So I had the benefit of, before I even thought I would run for school board, I met with Mr. Darup and we talked about this, and he told me these qualities, and he said, you know, I think you're qualified to run for school board, and our visions were aligned. And so then the next question after that is, why are you qualified? And so for me, when I looked at what the role of the school board is, I'm qualified with a unique background and a unique perspective to the board as an attorney, as an entrepreneur, as someone who has intentionally built culture and empowered employees and managed partnerships and managed a multi-million-dollar budget, but also as someone with a unique background to the board that is not represented currently. And that's why I'm qualified to serve on the school board.
All right, Ms. Siegel.
I'm going to go with a quote that I like because I'm always listening to music or listening to musicals, and one that I would share with my students when I was teaching, and whether if I was teaching seniors or I was also a class advisor. So I worked with classes freshman, sophomore, junior, senior class. I did that twice. So I really got to know the class by the time they were seniors. And I'd leave them with, you who are on the road must know the code that you will live by. Crosby, Stills, and Nash, teach your children. And so I keep that in mind as a teacher. And then I became a parent to two children in the district. And I kept thinking, I want to make sure that, you know, I'm teaching, I'm embodying empathy, integrity, transparency, accountability, and hoping that my children become lifelong learners too. And so as a board member, I will be thinking about making sure that I'm, through my values, through my goals, I'm demonstrating accountability, transparency, and empathy to lead.
Thank you. All right, now we're moving to closing statements. As I said, these are in reverse order of opening statements. So Ms. Chuan, you're first.
Thank you. First, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for all the time that went into preparing these questions and getting us candidates together. I was recently able to go to a neighborhood social for the League of Women Voters in Palo Alto, and it was amazing to be connected with such incredible community activists that we are blessed to have here in Palo Alto, so thank you. And then I just wanted to express that just the main concern I know people have with me. The elephant in the room is that I do not have long, deep, multi-general roots in Palo Alto, but rather, after thousands of hours of research into what education we wanted for our children, we chose to uproot our family, to give up home ownership in San Francisco, to become renters in Palo Alto for the public schools here, to be clear. We do not, unlike some, we do not consider the public schools here a backup option or a second choice. They are our first choice. They're the reason we moved here. And given my history and how passionate I am about equity and understanding through hands-on experience being in schools where I saw the opportunity gap, and I say opportunity gap and not achievement gap intentionally because it is exactly that, I felt that I needed to be a part of positive change. And if we can't create equity in our school district here in Palo Alto with all of the resources and incredible community we have, I don't know where can. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Siegel.
Hi, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters. I am very proud to be a member, and thank you for your advocacy efforts for past 100+ years. I'm running on my depth and breadth of my experience as an alum, as an educator, as a parent, as an in-class substitute teacher, and Project Cornerstone volunteer in the classrooms. I have a record of public service to schools, and my education career and background give me the unique perspective of its stakeholders. I will be an ally and make decisions with a devotion to inclusivity and equity. I will provide effective and collaborative governance alongside fellow trustees with the goal of providing excellence in education for every child in our district. I will lead with the courage to stand up for what is right. Experience matters. Our children only get one chance in each grade, and you as a parent only get to experience each grade once alongside them. If elected, I will advocate for policies that help to prevent any children from slipping through the cracks. I will end with a quote from Ella Nost. She's a social advocate and author. Every day in 100 small ways, our children ask, do you hear me? Do you see me? Do I matter? If I'm given the immense honor to serve on the board, my actions and my decisions will demonstrate a resounding yes. I see you, yes, I hear you, and you matter more than you will ever know.
Thank you. Mr. Dar.
I'm really gratified to have been on this forum with these two amazing candidates who clearly are dedicated and passionate and know their stuff. I'm always reminded at these forums, especially this one, 4 years ago, the one question that wasn't asked 4 years ago was, what would you do if 2 years into your term, we had a global pandemic and schools had to shut down? Because I don't know how I would answer that question. And the truth is nobody did. And yet every day on the school board is a learning opportunity. It's a challenge. And we reopened schools, one of the first in the state to do so when I was president. In 2021, we increased our reading scores in a way we never have in the past, despite the anticipated learning loss from COVID. And we made great strides in equity, the likes of which we haven't done in the 4 years prior to my election on the board. And same with mental health. We're on our way to developing a school-based mental health system to finally address the systemic issue of mental health that has been here since I went to school. And we passed a balanced budget this year, something that was very difficult for many districts considering the economic uncertainties due to COVID. So my ask of the community is, if you think that's the right direction to go in, then I'd be honored to have your vote. And if not, then you have two candidates here who would also be honored.
Thank you very much. Well, on behalf of the League of Women Voters of Palo Alto, I want to thank you candidates for your dedication in choosing to run for office and for participating in our forum tonight. I also want to thank our audience. Thank you for engaging in our democratic process. It matters. We encourage you to visit votersedge.org. There you'll find nonpartisan expanded information on candidates and ballot measures. There are also links to other sources of information about the upcoming election. Our league is hosting a forum for city council candidates on September 29th, and we are having pros and cons meetings on October 8th and October 11th. Please visit our website for more details. For the November election, all California voters will receive vote by mail ballots, which are being mailed by the week of October 10th. Please encourage your friends, your family, your neighbors, everyone to vote. And please remember yourselves, vote by November 8th. Thank you very much. Good night.